Hey, it's August 9th, 2025, and obviously I just can't stop. I'm taking a break from my vacation, I guess. So look at this here. This is from the Wistar Institute. It is a course for the fall of 2019. As you know, that's just before COVID-19. The course is titled Vaccines and Immune Therapy. And instructors are Dave Weiner, Paul Offit, Stanley Plotkin. Now that is quite a lineup. So let's go down a couple of different lectures here. There's probably names here that are important that I don't recognize. The kickoff is with Dave Weiner. I'll review who that is in a minute. Paul Offit, as many know, is according to the dialectic that we're supposed to stick with, he is Mr. Bad. He is the anti-children's health defense. He's opposite of Mary Holland. He's the bad guy that pushes all the childhood vaccines. And we're really revisiting what the whole career of Paul Offit is about. The next one, Correlates of Protection by Vaccines, Stanley Plotkin. Now, Stanley Plotkin is also noteworthy, also has a very, very negative reputation, at least in the community of people who are skeptical of vaccines or refuse any vaccines at all. Stanley Plotkin has a very negative reputation there. And on the third page, this is remarkable. Developing vaccines against emerging infections outside of the usual regulatory framework. Holy moly. Gary Kobinger, Public Health Agency, Canada. So Gary Kobinger, he worked with Francis Plummer up in Canada, but I think Gary Kobinger is probably amongst the top 2 or 3 colleagues of Guangzhou Qiao. That's Xiangguo, last name Qiu, the Chinese scientist who was accused of being a spy and was arrested or detained along with her husband in Canada in 2019. William Gruber, pneumococcal conjugate, Pfizer. Isn't he like an old college roommate of Barney Graham? And Barney Graham is like the head of the Anthony Fauci Vaccine Research Institute. Ruxandra Draghia, Vaccine Confidence, Fact, Fiction, Perception. She's been on my list as well. I don't know a lot about Ruxandra. All I want to do when I wake up in the morning is see you live. Ruxandra. Never thought that a girl like you could ever care for me. So first, let's look at Stanley Plotkin. He's 93 years old. He's still alive. He's been developing vaccines and studying immunology for a very long time. His career is amazing. Working at the Wistar Institute, let's just go over this a little bit here. He developed a vaccine for rubella using the WI-38, that's the Wistar Institute 38 cell line, which was provided to him by Leonard Hayflick, Leonard Hayflick of the Hayflick Limit. Plotkin, working with Thaddeus Wichter and Hilary Koprowski, produced a human vaccine for rabies during the 1960s and 1970s, also on the that's the Wistar Institute 38 cell line. So he has a career at the Wistar closely aligned with Hilary Koprowski, but also another vaccine that Plotkin co-developed, working with H. Fred Clark and Paul Offit, was for rotavirus. With respect to Hilary Koprowski, who lived a good long life, born 1916, died at age 96 in 2013. You should know him as for a long time director of the Wistar Institute, but also the first person to develop a polio vaccine, and it was an oral polio vaccine. And he first tried it himself. He tested it on himself, 1951. And then there's that supposed controversy where he tested it on children at I think it was an institute, 20 or so children in 1952. And it's interesting how one of the only narratives which has been approved, I guess, as a conspiracy narrative for the source of HIV was Hilary Koprowski and the oral polio vaccine. In fact, you can't even get the oral polio vaccine today in the United States. It's not approved, even though the oral polio vaccine was used in many places throughout the world. Interesting how they have been coming down on the oral polio vaccine. Paul Offit. Paul Offit, of course, is regularly on the Vincent Racaniello This Week in Virology, and again is considered to be the epitome of evil. Paul Prophet, etc. So we're finding a new way of looking at Paul Offit. We know that he developed a vaccine that's on the childhood schedule. It's the rotavirus vaccine. And the one thing that I didn't really appreciate until recently is that the rotavirus vaccine is an orally administered vaccine. Also, Paul Offit, it doesn't do a good job on the Wikipedia page, also worked pretty extensively under Hillary Koprowski. Hillary Koprowski oral polio vaccine. Start to see a little pattern here. Now, while Paul Offit is a big defender of the childhood vaccine schedule, he has been quoted as recently as 2013 saying that there's no reason why all vaccines can't someday be orally administered. It's a very interesting statement to make. I mean, why change something if it's not broken? Before we move on to Dave Weiner, I also wanted to note that Paul Offit, and along with work that he's done with his wife, been highlighting the risk of using too many antibiotics in young children. He is one of the most public faces in the scientific consensus that vaccines have no association with autism. People may not want to hear this, but I think that's a legitimate thing to question. However, though, it's the antibiotic part. I've made the mistake of viewing his apprehension of using too many antibiotics as just another way to be able to push more vaccines. But it's possible, matter of fact, it's probably even likely, that you take too many antibiotics as a young child or as an infant, that is a very destructive thing to do. A young child, infant, doesn't even have a properly developed microbiome in their gut, and antibiotics, too many too early, can wreck that and can lead to a lifelong illnesses, maybe even injuries, which may manifest themselves with neurological challenges, which sometimes are put into the category of autism. We don't know. Now, of course, other injuries could lead children, along with diet and whatever, to need more oral antibiotics. It's a lot more to it than just too many vaccines, and vaccines cause autism. Remember, we're reviewing this 2019 course at the Wistar. It's Dave Weiner, Paul Offit, Stanley Plotkin. Again, I didn't know that Weiner, Offit, and Plotkin worked together that closely. Now, we know that Stanley Plotkin was chief scientist at a company called Offit Corporation, which is a vaccine research and development corporation that focuses on vaccines or immunizations that are delivered with electroporation, not injected, not oral either, electroporation. And that company is co-founded by Dave Weiner and another person who is the University of Pennsylvania. And Stanley Plotkin was a chief science officer at that company. Now, Dave Weiner, although there's not an extensive amount of documentation of him co-developing any vaccines with Paul Offit, Dave Weiner went on to become director of the Wistar Institute after Hillary Koprowski stepped down. There may have been an interim director, but this is stunning. Let's think about this. We have Hillary Koprowski, who is mostly known for the oral polio vaccine, and Hillary Koprowski, longtime director of the Wistar Institute, Hillary Koprowski, who around September of 2001 was advocating for a plant-grown vaccine for anthrax, which could be taken orally. It could be eaten. Think about that. A strong pursuit of orally administered vaccines. Next director of the Wistar Institute, Dave Weiner, he starts up an electroporation company. While that's not oral, it's not intramuscular injection. Studying under Hillary Koprowski, Paul Offit, he makes the rotavirus vaccine, orally administered. Stanley Plotkin becomes a chief science officer of Offit Corporation after working with Hillary Koprowski. And Stanley Plotkin, of course, also. Once you're with Offit, now you are effectively signing on for electroporation. This is one mentorship chain. Hillary Koprowski, Dave Weiner, Paul Offit, Stanley Plotkin. And although all of them have been involved in the development of injected or intramuscularly injected vaccines, all of them also seem to share a lifelong interest in pursuing other ways to administer vaccines. Here is a 2012 white paper from another name. Sorry to overwhelm you here, but this is with Jay Brzozowski, and this is titled Oral Vaccines, Directed Safe Passage to the Front Line of Defense. Jay Brzozowski has pretty extensive collaboration with Robert Malone. Robert Malone, Maha Institute of the subcommittee right now of the FDA, Robert Malone with Children's Health Defense, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's interesting because, let's go back, Robert Malone did the incorporation paperwork for Offit Corporation, USA, with his wife, Offit, the electroporation company. Robert Malone, it would stand to reason, has a lifelong connection with other professionals who are, again, seeking new ways to administer vaccines, which are beyond simply intramuscular injection. And I think this is kind of the tip of the iceberg. It shows that there is a long-term, even multi-generational pursuit of a new era or new types, new families of vaccines, which can get away from intramuscular injection. Not that intramuscular injection always causes injury, but I think it does cause a lot of injuries. So with all that in mind, now let's go and view a 2016 clip of a good longtime friend, couch surfing friend and previous roommate of Robert Malone, and that is David Hone, previous chief science officer of the immunology at the DTRA, the Defense Threat Reduction Agency.
So when I first got in the division, I went into Dr. Hand's office and I said, "Sir, I think it'd be really nice if we sort of thought about a long-term, vision. What are we going for?" And so I said, "Well, I have in mind the cart that Cuba Gooding got into in Outbreak. He goes in with a bag of blood, and 5 minutes later he comes out with the vaccine. I want that cart. Can we make that?" And Dr. Hand looked at me and said, "That's interesting, but no, I want better than that." And he said, "I want to have a warfighter with a device on this arm, and it senses what it's being exposed to, and on this arm, it automatically injects the countermeasure." So I was outdone. But the concept of forward deployable, real-time medical countermeasures is something that we have in mind. It's a long-term vision, and if you walk back to where we are today, we're trying to plot that path, and I would encourage you to think about what is that road that gets us to that long-term vision.
So David Hone was evangelizing electroporation. Now let's go to the fall of 2019 symposium where Rick Bright, who Robert Malone has been close with and advising for well over 10 years, and what he said.
Venter has written that he thinks we ought to have a vaccine such that if you take off in a plane from Hong Kong and are infected, by the time your plane lands in New York, there ought to be a vaccine assembled and deliverable to you. How far are we from that? Are we ever going to get there?
I'm not going to say how far away, but I don't think that's too crazy. I think that if we move towards the era of synthetic-based vaccines, I think we remove the dependencies of thinking the vaccine has to be something that we have to grow into something else, in an egg, in a cell, or an insect cell, any type of dependency on growth. If we can move into more synthetic, the nucleic acid-based, messenger RNA-based, those sequences can be rapidly shared around the world. Enzymes that can synthesize the small fragments of messenger RNA necessary to go into the vaccine can be made in a shoebox size system right now, which is translatable into a 3D printer-like or inkjet printer-like thing. Now, putting those in a system to print those on a patch that a self-administered vaccine could happen, the technologies are out there. We haven't demonstrated their true effectiveness and ability for a vaccine, but it is not too crazy to think that an outbreak of a novel avian virus could occur in China somewhere. We could get the RNA sequence from that, beam it to a number of regional centers, if not local, if not even in your home at some point, and print those vaccines on a patch and self-administer. We're a ways out, but the technology is there to be adapted and assembled to put in that futuristic view of a rapid response to an emerging novel threat.
And a patch, that is also electroporation. So we still have a lot of work to do, but it's pretty clear that there is an extensive pursuit of electroporation, administration of a vaccine or a countermeasure on the skin or directly onto, for example, a tumor, or to pursue oral vaccines. This is a key thing. I think this says a lot. If we are still in an era where we are pursuing how to apply the countermeasure, I think it goes to show really how much runway is still ahead.